So current UFC welterweight champion Islam Makhachev will be fighting Ian Machado Gary in about a week and a half from today. And it's been pretty much predicted by most of the MMA world that Islam Makhachev will win that fight. By how much, it varies. I said that, and I will continue to say that Islam will likely win that fight by the, how they say, skin of his teeth. He'll nick by with the win. I think it'll be a really close decision win. I think Ian Gary will turn that fight into a dogfight that becomes neck and neck for almost the entirety of it. But I do still predict Islam to come out as the victor. That being so, people are already starting to talk about Islam versus Carlos Prates. Carlos Prates himself has said, I think like yesterday or 2 days ago, that he is in fact not fighting anybody else before fighting for the title. He says he has done enough to earn a title shot, and I think he's right. I think that pretty much confirms it. I think the UFC has told him that his next fight will be for the UFC title at welterweight. Islam Makhachev has also pretty much backed up that take by already pretty much sizing up Carlos, saying that he'll be an interesting matchup next, which is pretty cool. A bit of an aura play from Islam, as he's already seemingly overlooking his fight with Ian Gary and looking at who's next. But I'm sure he's very much prepared for Ian Gary, the smart fighter that he is. I've already broken down the Ian versus Islam fight, as I just did a little bit of it earlier in this video. But what I want to talk about today is that potential fight between Carlos and Islam. I'll have a follow-up after the Islam-Ian fight, because I think I need to see how Islam can do against rangier, taller fighters in terms of getting close enough to grapple them and put them in bad grappling positions, maybe even outstriking them as well. And after I see that fight, I'll be able to gauge, I'll be able to get a better sense of how Islam can do against taller, rangier fighters. It'll give me more information to properly predict a fight between Islam and Carlos Prates. But for now, I still want to, at least dip my toes in the intellectual water of how a fight would go between Islam and Carlos. Carlos Prates has surprised me and overly impressed me at how great he can become. I thought his rise was firmly stopped when he lost to Ian Gary, because Ian outworked him, IQ-wise. He knew how to just, demoralize and deplete Carlos Prates in terms of what Carlos has been good at since he's started MMA. Establishing range and striking and utilizing that enormous amount of power behind his hands. But Ian does that to everybody. That's what I said Ian Gary's talent is. It's minimizing his opponent's talents, because he's that smart. He has one of the highest fight IQs in the game today. But, Carlos took that loss and built from it. He worked on it, and he became even more effective with what he's already gifted at. He's so brilliant at establishing his range, at utilizing his length, his reach advantage, being able to get the most out of it and put him in excellent positions to place all that power behind his hands correctly. He's done it with Leon Edwards. He's done it with JDM. I do believe he's proved that he's ready for a championship title, because he's already gotten rid of two former welterweight title holders, two former welterweight champions in Leon Edwards and Jack Della Maddalena. So he's proven that he's ready. And he's gotten rid of both of them, JDM and Leon Edwards, the same way, by establishing range and putting together, that key long distance sniper-like shot that put them both out. Leon Edwards more in more of an emphatic fashion than JDM, but still. And that's why I feel like a fight between Carlos Prates and Islam Makhachev is an especially scary fight for Islam. It's a scary fight for him, because Carlos has he's become such a brilliant fighter when establishing range and utilizing his range and controlling range control, at being one of the best at doing that in the game to this day. It's scary. It's scary for the shorter fighter that is especially grappling dependent in Islam Makhachev. And Islam's striking is great, don't get me wrong. The guy has built up his striking to become world class. The issue is being able to make that striking effective. If you're the shorter fighter, it's especially hard. Because the taller fighter, the rangier fighter, is going to have an easier time placing punches than you are, because you're shorter. You know? We've seen what can happen in those types of fights. In that fight not so long ago between Sean Brady and Michael Morales, where Michael Morales was just teeing off on Sean Brady, and Sean, being the shorter fighter, wasn't able to throw effective punches or kicks back because of that range issue. And we could very well see that same type of stylistic fight happen between Carlos Prates and Islam Makhachev. What Islam obviously needs to do is get past the reach of Carlos Prates, and I'm not sure he can do that. But maybe he can. I think, the upcoming fight between Ian Gary and Islam will be able to tell me and you guys more about that, about whether or not Islam can get past rangier fighters, whether or not he can inventively create ways of, utilizing head movement or feints, or maybe just speed in general to get past long, rangy punches and kicks to get a hold of these taller fighters. Because it's dangerous. It's dangerous shooting for takedowns against a guy that can snipe you from range. And Carlos Prates has proven that he's able to do that, even against the highest skilled fighters. Against a Leon Edwards, who's known for his rangy punching and kicking as well. Against Jack Della Maddalena, who has known to be a gifted striker. Like Carlos Prates, man, he's evolved. He really has evolved, and he's created such an effective form of range control that he doesn't really need to worry about grappling as much, because that type of range control, it keeps effective grapplers at bay, because they don't want to get in the mix. They don't want to, overly endanger themselves by creating a predictable takedown attempt pattern or something like that that'll leave significant areas of their body open when they try to go in for takedowns or go in for clench work, things like that. So I'm especially excited for this upcoming fight between Ian Gary and Islam, because it's going to tell me a lot more about what Islam can do against these taller fighters. Because I'm right now thinking about a good way for Islam to get past the range of an Ian Gary, of a Carlos Prates, and nothing's coming to mind besides, trying to maybe counterpunch or create counter kicks that can then lead to openings for takedowns. But when we're talking about Islam being able to counterpunch or counter kick, you also have to then keep in mind that, again, Islam's a shorter fighter here. He's going to have a hard time landing those counters unless he wants to establish some sort of Mike Tyson-like style where he's constantly shelling up and utilizing a lot of head movement. Or maybe he wants to do what Henry Cejudo has been known to do and just establish a lot of, movements in and out of the pocket really fast. It's hard to do. It's hard to do because that can really expend a lot of energy, especially early on in a fight. So I'm very intrigued and curious as to what game plan Islam has for Ian, because I think that game plan will be very similar to what Islam will then have for Carlos Prates. For Carlos, obviously, like not the blueprint, but the method is already laid out for what he needs to do against Islam. He's got to establish his range. That's it. Don't let Islam get a hold of you, because if Islam does, then yes, Carlos is obviously in dangerous water. But it's that ability of Carlos to keep grapplers at bay, that worries me for a fight against a fighter like Islam. I like both Islam and Carlos around this at the same level. I'm not too much of an Islam fan. That's just me though. I don't dislike Islam either. I'm less of a Carlos Prates fan though, because he's still part of the Fighting Nerds group, and I've never been a fan of the Fighting Nerds because, as I've told you guys before, I feel like they've always been just way too in over their heads at times. You know, especially with none of them having a UFC championship belt between them. But again, you know, I think it's just an overall fun fight that'll be fun for anybody to watch. I don't think I gave you my prediction for the fight yet. I just kind of gave you my overall breakdown for what I think happens. If you were to ask me who wins between Carlos Prates and Islam Makhachev right now, before Islam has faced Ian Gary, I would say, I'd say Islam. I feel like there's going to be at least, I think Islam needs one successful takedown to be able to submit Carlos Prates. I think that's very bold to say, but I think it's the truth. Islam is such a effective and dominant grappler that he only really needs to take Carlos Prates down once to find his way to a submission. Because Carlos is so lanky, and I feel like that can be a disadvantage on the ground, where you've got, you know, extra long limbs that can be taken control of for arm bars and Americanas and Kimuras. You know, you can also do the same with leg locks and knee bars. So I think Carlos would have a really tough time defending submissions against Islam on the ground. So it's up to Carlos to not let the fight go to the ground. But I think it will. I think it inevitably will. I don't think Carlos will be able to knock Islam out before Islam is able to get at least one takedown in. So give me Islam via, I'd say, second round submission right now. And then we'll know more after the Islam versus Ian Gary fight as to whether or not Islam can effectively get past rangier fighters to be able to grapple them sooner rather than later. Because if Islam can't get the takedown sooner, then my prediction will likely change towards Carlos Prates being able to get the knockout sooner than Islam is able to get Carlos to the ground. Overall, let me know what you think.